I'm only still here because of you, Derek from Catalyst Industries whispered after his fourth bourbon. Tears were streaming down his face again. This round of waterworks was triggered by our CEO's latest product disaster, and I'd spent the previous 68 hours keeping the account from imploding into a supernova of breach notices and Twitter rants. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. I nodded, squeezed his shoulder and slid the renewal paperwork across the sticky bar table. He scrawled his signature next to a ring of condensation and the remnants of some tragic nachos. That was a Wednesday. Listen, when you're the person who knows their daughter's soccer schedule, their husband's sobriety date, and the name of their rescue dog, Mr. Pickles, rest his soul, you earn something deeper than quarterly metrics and teams' reactions. You earn trust. The raw, messy foxhole kind of trust that makes a fully grown executive text you, emergency, at 2:47 a.m. on a Saturday from a hotel bar after a pitch implodes and his VP is threatening to fly in personally. I always answered. Every single time. Didn't matter if it was midnight or Thanksgiving morning. I'd pick up the phone. Never logged those hours, never hunted for recognition. Because in the cutthroat world of enterprise technology, keeping a client matters more than any performance bonus ever could. The new executives didn't understand that. They thought relationship management meant automated birthday emails and generic LinkedIn posts. They believed connections were just data points in a Salesforce dashboard. I was something they couldn't quantify, so they started looking at me like I was a liability instead of an asset. Not that I gave a damn. Not yet, anyway. Let me rewind. 9 years. That's how long I'd been grinding at Vanguard Systems. Started as a junior account manager. Clawed my way to director of strategic client relations after personally salvaging a $178 million contract in year 3 by flying to Dallas on my own credit card and handholding a data center migration that had gone so catastrophically wrong it made the Hindenburg look like a minor fender bender. I earned every inch of my territory. Not through boardroom politics, through showing up when it mattered. But something shifted about 14 months ago. The old executive VP retired, cashed out or got forced out. I never learned which. The replacement was named Garrett, fresh from some venture capital chop shop, dressed like he was auditioning for a documentary about tech bro failures. Garrett worshipped data visualization, optimization frameworks and organizational hierarchies. But mostly Garrett worshipped himself. He started calling me Trin. I corrected him twice. He claimed it was informal and friendly. I explained it was dismissive and unprofessional. HR scheduled a coaching session about my communication style. Garrett's big innovation? Distributed client ownership. That was corporate speak for shoving accounts onto junior staff so Garrett could brag about operational efficiency in his board presentations. I watched satisfaction scores nosedive like a piano off a skyscraper. Clients started contacting me directly, desperate for someone who actually knew their business. I helped them quietly, stayed in the shadows. I was still the fixer, just invisible now. That's when the suspicion started creeping in. I caught it in the expressions of middle managers during video conferences. The extended silences. The just touching base messages from HR that reeked of forced politeness and veiled threats. I wasn't naive. I understood I was too experienced, too senior, too critical to fit cleanly into Garrett's shiny new organizational flowchart. I represented a problem. Problems get eliminated. So I started paying closer attention. Really listening. Documenting everything. Every quiet confession of "we'd be lost without you." Every client who hinted at other opportunities. Every dinner where someone complained about Vanguard becoming too corporate, too distant, too bureaucratic. I never initiated any of it. I just stopped redirecting the conversation. But back then I still believed in institutional loyalty. I genuinely thought maybe if I just weathered this phase the situation would stabilize. Maybe Garrett would flame out on his own arrogance and transfer somewhere else. Maybe the board would recognize the problem. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Now if you've stuck around this long and you're thinking, this sounds disturbingly familiar, you're probably right. This exact scenario is unfolding in offices nationwide like some inescapable corporate nightmare loop. And yeah, about 96% of you are probably watching without subscribing, which is basically like showing up to someone's wedding, eating half the buffet and bouncing before the speeches. So hit that subscribe button, smash the like and support the crew that delivers the chaos before compliance shuts us down. Back to Trinity. There's this strange phenomenon that occurs when clients start viewing you as the company itself. You stop representing the logo and start embodying the relationship. Not in some shallow customer-first marketing way. I mean genuine loyalty. The contractual, blood oath kind of loyalty. Over the following months, I'd discover exactly how deep that loyalty ran. Because while Garrett was busy attempting to replace me with a Gantt chart, my clients were quietly mobilizing for conflict. They were just waiting for my signal. I never planned to strike first. But I was absolutely prepared to finish it. The first shot came disguised as a calendar notification. Subject line: Strategic Alignment Discussion. No context, no bullet points, just those 3 ominous words. Garrett's executive assistant, who called herself a visibility coordinator, whatever that meant, scheduled it for 7:30 a.m. on a Friday. The most passive-aggressive time slot in corporate America. When I entered the conference room, Garrett was already positioned at the head of the table, clutching his overpriced cold brew like it contained the secrets of the universe. HR was present too. Samuel Whitfield, the guy who always smiled like he'd just put down an injured animal but felt really good about his compassionate approach. Garrett opened with a slide deck. Naturally. Slide 1. A Venn diagram labeled Client Stewardship versus Scalable Infrastructure. Slide 2. A photograph of me pulled from our own company site underneath the heading Dependency Risk Factor. Trinity, Garrett began, fake concern plastered across his face. We've identified that your client relationships have created some boundary issues. You're investing a disproportionate amount of effort on direct contact. That's not sustainable long term. I leaned back, crossed my arms. Define disproportionate. Samuel clicked to the next slide. A bar graph appeared. According to our tracking data, your client interaction hours exceed the departmental average by 230%. You've expensed more client dinners than our entire Southwest region combined. And this is critical. You've been bypassing designated account executives. I met Garrett's eyes directly. That's because the account executives you hired couldn't find their own office with GPS and a guide dog. One client called me in tears because a rep told them security patches were optional upgrades. Garrett didn't flinch. That's precisely the issue. Undermining the team structure, operating as an independent agent. This isn't about heroism. It's about professional boundaries. I had to bite my tongue to prevent the laugh from escaping. Boundaries from the man who posted gym selfies during quarterly earnings calls. Samuel's recommendation: I take a strategic step back. Let junior staff develop into their roles. Focus on internal enablement initiatives. Translation: sit down, shut up, and become less useful. They didn't terminate me. They declawed me. I walked out of that meeting feeling like a guard dog that had just been put on a vegan diet and muzzled. My access badge still worked. My title remained unchanged. But my leash had just gotten a whole lot shorter. The surveillance ramped up immediately. My calendar started filling with shadow sessions from Garrett's golden children, guys who couldn't spell API, much less negotiate a 7-figure SLA violation. My expense reports got flagged for review. A client dinner I'd attended for 7 consecutive years was suddenly deemed non-essential expenditure. Samuel requested I start submitting daily summaries of all client calls to ensure alignment with organizational objectives. It felt like being audited by toddlers wearing business casual. Then came the whispers. Colleagues stopped including me in email threads. Slack channels I'd created were archived without explanation. A peer I'd personally mentored pulled me aside after hours. Garrett's talking about succession planning for your position. Succession planning. I wasn't dying. I wasn't retiring. I was being surgically excised while still breathing. But the shift wasn't just internal. My clients felt it too. Malcolm from Apex Engineering called after a junior associate showed up to their quarterly review unannounced, trying to replace me. Trinity, I don't want to be dramatic, but if you're not managing our account, we're not renewing. Just being transparent. Then came the watershed moment. A casual lunch with Brianna from Horizon Analytics. We were halfway through our salads when she said, "You know, if you ever left Vanguard, we'd follow you." No hesitation. Zero ambiguity. I tried to laugh it off. "Don't tempt me." She didn't laugh. "I'm completely serious. You're not just our account manager. You're our insurance policy. If you're gone, I'm pulling our contract." I smiled, but internally something fundamental shifted. That night I poured myself wine, opened a new folder on my personal laptop, and titled it Contingency Protocol. I didn't know exactly what I was preparing for. Not yet. But I recognized the atmosphere had changed. The tone in meetings, the glances from HR, the way Garrett stopped using my first name and started saying, legacy personnel. I'd become a relic, a liability. And liabilities in organizations like ours get packaged into severance agreements with non-disparagement clauses. So I began documenting every policy change that contradicted previous standards. Every client complaint that got routed to me after being bungled by junior staff. Every instance where I was told to step back while simultaneously being begged to step in. Because when the axe finally fell, and it would, I wasn't going to bleed out quietly. I was going to hand them a file so comprehensive it would give their legal team carpal tunnel. And somewhere in my gut I started wondering, what if I stopped being the person who saved every deal? What if I wasn't the safety net anymore? What if I was the trapdoor? The first person I contacted wasn't a headhunter, therapist, or even my partner. It was my sister Nicole, who happened to be the most terrifying contract attorney on the West Coast. Picture a woman who drafts prenuptial agreements for tech billionaires before breakfast, dismantles NDAs for entertainment, and once made a pharmaceutical executive cry by quoting his own corporate bylaws during a deposition. We hadn't talked in months, but after that lunch with Brianna and a Friday afternoon performance optimization check-in email from HR, I dialed her number. She answered immediately. Trinity. You only call when you're either planning a coup or trying to prevent one. Option 3, I said. I want to prepare for a corporate execution. Slow, legal, airtight. Nicole's voice practically purred. Finally. About damn time. We met the next morning at this tiny cafe she preferred because nobody here knows how to litigate. I laid everything out. Garrett, Samuel, the passive-aggressive purgatory they were engineering around me, and the off-record comments from clients suggesting they'd terminate contracts if I left. She listened, then smiled like a cat who'd just spotted a drunk mouse on roller skates. You're sitting on a goldmine, Trin. You don't need revenge. You need leverage. Ever heard of a key person dependency clause? I hadn't. Not the way she meant it. Here's the concept. It's language buried deep in contracts or signed as an independent addendum that gives the client an exit option if a specifically named individual is removed, reassigned, or terminated. Not illegal, not even uncommon. Just rare. Because most companies assume they own the relationship. What Nicole and I understood, I was the relationship. The clients knew it too. Within a week, she drafted a flexible template. Clean, legally bulletproof, beautiful in its simplicity. The language was elegant, but the message was blunt. In the event that Trinity Lawson is no longer directly managing this account, the client reserves the right to initiate immediate contract review or termination without penalty. No drama, no threats. Just facts. The first person I floated it to was Malcolm from Apex Engineering. We were on a video call reviewing their renewal timeline when I said, hypothetically, if I left Vanguard, would you want a clause allowing you to reconsider your contract? He didn't even pause. Can we actually do that? I have an attorney, I said. We can draft it. Just like that, the first domino tipped. Over the next 7 weeks, I moved carefully. I didn't approach legal. I didn't use company systems. Nicole handled everything externally. Each agreement was customized, independently signed, and backed up to personal storage. They weren't threats. They were contingency plans. Safety valves for people who trusted me. By week 5 I had 9 signed. By week 7 I had 17. Including some of the highest value, most prestigious clients in our portfolio. What surprised me wasn't how quickly they agreed. It was how enthusiastic they were. You've saved us more times than I can count, said Rachel from Integrated Solutions. If they push you out, it proves they don't actually care about our success. I'd follow you into any company, said Derek. Just say when. They weren't loyal to Vanguard systems. They were loyal to me. That realization hit hard and clean. My employer didn't deserve me anymore. Not in spirit, not in leverage, not in trust. They were coasting on a reputation I'd built brick by brick while Garrett played dress-up executive and HR played bureaucratic theater. I'd spent years cleaning up disasters, smoothing over executive incompetence, translating arrogance into actionable solutions. I'd protected leadership from accountability. And the moment I became inconvenient, they tried to phase me out like a software update nobody asked for. No confrontation. Just polite suffocation. Well, they weren't the only ones allowed to prepare. By the end of the second month, Nicole had locked in 23 customized dependency clauses. All silent, all legal, all sitting like dormant explosives under the foundation of Vanguard's Q4 revenue forecasts. I was done being the safety net. From now on, I'd be the tripwire. The moment they pulled the wrong lever, they'd discover exactly how many strings I wasn't holding anymore. Because I'd handed them to someone else. That night, I poured myself Cabernet, sat on my balcony and opened a fresh journal. Page 1. Exit strategy. Client-driven. Underneath, a single sentence I circled 4 times. No more saving people who wouldn't save me. The email arrived at 3:58 p.m. on a Monday, right as I was wrapping up a call with a client whose infrastructure had failed for the 5th time in 8 weeks. Subject line: Behavioral Standards Review. The kind of corporate word salad that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. It came from Samuel Whitfield, naturally. Our HR shepherd in earth-tone cardigans who always looked like he'd been meditation crying in his Tesla. The body was packed with weaponized cheerfulness. We'd like to create a supportive space to explore growth opportunities within evolving role parameters. Translation: Bring your badge and your best smile. We're coming for your jugular. The conference room was already uncomfortably warm when I walked in. They always crank the temperature when they want you sweating. Garrett was there, hair gelled within an inch of its life, tapping a Mont Blanc pen like he was about to authorize an exorcism. Samuel sat beside him, tablet ready, sympathy preloaded on his face like it was part of his outfit. Thanks for joining us, Trinity, Samuel started, voice soft like I was a lost puppy instead of a wolf in their conference room. We wanted to discuss some patterns. Garrett jumped in immediately. There's been concern about professional boundary management. I tilted my head. Boundary management how? Samuel tapped his screen. Over-engagement. High volumes of off-platform communication. Clients expressing personal dependency. One even referred to you as irreplaceable in an email to procurement. I snorted. How terrible for them. Garrett didn't find it amusing. We're trying to avoid single-point failure. I smiled. Isn't that literally the definition of client retention? He blinked. We're building systems, not personality cults. Samuel leaned forward. We've noticed your involvement sometimes creates confusion about chain of command. Oh, I'm fully aware who's in command, I said. It's just not who you think it is. Silence. Garrett cleared his throat, clearly unamused. We're requesting that you scale back. Let the designated teams manage their responsibilities. No more direct outreach. No more personal dinners. No more off-hours communication outside approved channels. Absolutely, I said, nodding like an obedient employee. You're completely right. I should be more mindful. Garrett smiled like he'd just neutered a threat. What he couldn't see, what he never saw, was the flicker behind my eyes. The part already calculating which 4 clients I'd be calling tonight. They wanted to pretend I was some clingy dinosaur desperately hanging on to outdated relationship models, fine. I'd play the fossil. But I'd do it with teeth. Back at my desk, I opened my secure laptop, the one never connected to company VPN, and updated the spreadsheet. 4 new files for new contracts, all worded slightly differently. One cited service continuity concerns. Another used confidence framework. All said the same thing. If Trinity Lawson disappears, we renegotiate. By Thursday they were signed. Malcolm from Apex even added a handwritten note. Honestly, we trust you more than we trust their technology. By Friday, 3 more were pending. My little folder, once a whisper of resistance, had become a full arsenal. 27 clients. 27 loaded chambers. And still I smiled through the meetings. Nodded during change management calls. Left emoji reactions on Slack posts about Garrett's latest innovation sprint. Let them think I was cooperating. Because while they spent energy sanitizing my calendar and removing me from client-facing communications, I was engineering something they couldn't comprehend. Quiet loyalty. Earned loyalty. Loyalty you can't reassign to a new account manager with a handshake and a CRM login. What they never understood, what no MBA program teaches, is that people don't stay for products. They stay for people who actually give a damn. And I'd given a damn right up until they made that my problem. That week I started printing hard copies of the signed clauses. Not for immediate use. Just insurance. Tucked into a locked drawer in my home office. Each signature felt like a poker chip in a game they didn't know they were playing. I could feel the threshold beneath my feet. That invisible line you cross where there's no turning back. Not emotionally, not politically, not professionally. I wasn't just preparing anymore. I was waiting. And the waiting wasn't passive. It was surgical. Every forced smile, every compliance meeting, every passive-aggressive calendar audit they threw my direction, I absorbed like fuel. Because when the moment arrived, and it would, I wasn't going to fight. I was going to walk out with a smile so serene they wouldn't realize the building was burning until the alarm started screaming. And I wouldn't even be there to watch. The warning came from Lydia, the only person left on my floor who still made eye contact in the hallway. She wasn't supposed to be in that meeting. Some internal talent optimization nonsense Garrett was orchestrating where he gathered department heads to evaluate legacy value alignment. Translation. Identify which veterans still had a pulse and which could be swapped out for ambitious newcomers with bright smiles and online certificates. She pulled me aside after lunch, voice low, eyes darting like we were in a Cold War thriller. Look, I shouldn't say this, but Garrett's gunning for your position. Said you're outdated. That you don't scale. That you're too emotionally entangled with the client portfolio. I blinked. Emotionally entangled? She nodded. His exact words. He's positioning you as a bottleneck. Says client loyalty to an individual is a liability, not an asset. Rich, coming from someone whose loyalty was entirely to his reflection. I thanked her, kept my expression neutral, walked back to my desk like nothing happened. But internally something fractured. Not dramatically. More like the final thread in a rope giving out after months of strain. I sat down, opened my contingency folder, stared at the list. 27 signed, 3 pending. By end of day it would be 30. At 4:18 p.m., an email landed in my encrypted inbox. Subject line, per your recommendation. From Rachel, the CFO at Integrated Solutions. She'd always been sharp, measured, tactical. The kind of executive who never needed to raise her voice because her silence did the cutting. Inside was a draft letter already on integrated letterhead. Effective immediately, we are invoking Section 4B of the Retention Agreement pending re-evaluation of services following the departure of Trinity Lawson from our engagement team. Please consider all deliverables and milestones suspended until further discussion. The closing line. Our partnership has always been based on trust. That trust has a name. No preamble, no fluff, just the document ready to deploy. Underneath, Rachel had written, "Say when." I leaned back, hand over my mouth. Not from shock. From confirmation. All those months of wondering if I was paranoid, if I was overestimating my value, if the relationships I'd built were just politeness and professional courtesy. They weren't. They were real. And now they were weapons. But not everyone saw it that way. The silence inside Vanguard had become suffocating. People stopped including me in strategy sessions. Internal threads I used to lead were mysteriously archived. Junior reps I'd personally trained were suddenly copying Garrett for strategic context. HR started including vague reminders in emails about maintaining team cohesion and respecting communication protocols. I'd become radioactive. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being erased. Slowly, quietly, efficiently. Death by administrative attrition. The kind of internal purge that leaves no fingerprints, just a shrinking desk, a cold office, and an inbox that stops lighting up. But outside those walls I'd never been louder. Clients called through personal numbers. Texts rolled in constantly. "Are you okay? We heard something strange from the new rep. Want to confirm with you directly. Garrett's guy said you were stepping back. That true?" I told them all the same thing. Let's stay connected. Just in case. I started seeing myself differently. Not as an employee, not even as a leader. I was infrastructure. Living, breathing infrastructure built around relationships no quarterly forecast could replicate. I wasn't a line item on payroll. I was the bridge connecting 2 continents. If they burned me, they'd drown in the chaos I'd been holding back. One night, after an especially surreal team meeting where Garrett announced a client intimacy reboot, without so much as glancing my direction, I went home, poured bourbon, pulled up the complete list. 30 accounts willing to walk. Collectively, $260 million in recurring contracts. Just under half the company's annual revenue. I wasn't wondering if I could bring the building down anymore. I was wondering when to strike the match. And for the first time in months I slept soundly. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are always the day they do it. Far enough from the weekend to minimize gossip. Close enough to Friday that people forget by happy hour. Nature loves patterns. Patterns feel safe, predictable, civilized. But nothing about what went down that day was civilized. I was halfway through drafting a Q3 renewal strategy for a client whose servers had been failing for 12 days straight when my Slack lit up. Samuel from HR. Hi Trinity. Can you swing by for a quick sync in conference room C? The exclamation point was a nice touch. Like a serial killer offering cookies before the knife. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. I already knew. I closed my laptop, grabbed my phone, left my coffee mug on the desk. Didn't even bother closing my browser tabs. When I stepped into conference room C, it was already staged like a bad courtroom drama. Samuel sat on one side, tablet out, expression carefully neutral. Garrett was in the corner, arms folded, leaning like he thought he was the protagonist in a startup documentary. The blinds were closed. The door clicked shut behind me with finality. Thanks for coming, Samuel began, tone so gentle I almost laughed. Like he was breaking up with me after a 2-week relationship. Garrett stayed quiet. Watching. Feeding off it. Samuel continued. We're here today to inform you that effective immediately, your employment with Vanguard Systems is being terminated. No build-up, no preamble. Just the guillotine. I stayed standing. No reason to sit through my own funeral. Samuel glanced at his tablet. The decision follows multiple policy violations including misuse of company time, unauthorized client communications, and failure to adhere to internal engagement protocols. I raised an eyebrow. Did you practice that in the mirror or did Garrett write it for you? Garrett smirked. You're not bigger than the company, Trinity. I finally smiled. Slow, deliberate. The kind of smile that makes people nervous even if they don't understand why. Oh, I know, I said. But the relationships I built are. Samuel slid papers across the table like he was serving dessert. Here's your final documentation. Severance, transition terms, NDA. He kept talking but I stopped listening. My eyes were on Garrett, who looked like a kid who just keyed a car and thought he got away with it. The man had zero idea the vehicle was wired to explode. Before you ask, Samuel added, you're not required to sign immediately. You can review and return within 7 business days. I picked up the envelope, tapped it against my palm, set it down. Strongest relationships I ever built, I said. And you just handed them back to me. Garrett's face twitched. Barely. But I saw it. I reached for my badge. Didn't throw it, didn't slam it. Just slid it across the table like a poker chip I no longer needed. The room went silent. Tight. Humming with the kind of tension that only exists when someone realizes they're not holding the cards anymore. And that was it. No scene, no shouting, no begging for recommendations or LinkedIn endorsements. I left the room, past 4 coworkers in the hallway, none of whom made eye contact, and walked out the glass front doors of a company I'd carried for 9 years. The sun was too bright, the air too sharp. Everything felt surreal. Like stepping into a film where the main character dies in Act 2 and nobody's told the director yet. I got in my car, closed the door, sat still. No tears, no fury. Just breathing. Then I pulled out my personal phone, the one they never knew I used for client calls, and opened Signal. 3 messages were already waiting. We heard. We're ready. Want us to trigger the clause? Say when. I typed back one line. Wait for my attorney. Because this wasn't the ending. It was the fuse. That night, the sky over my neighborhood was deep violet. One of those early autumn evenings where the cold seeps through windows like a warning. I sat on my porch, blanket across my lap, glass of Merlot in hand, watching streetlights flicker on like dominoes falling into darkness. My laptop sat open beside me. Secure connection. Burner Wi-Fi. Nothing traceable. At 7:23 p.m., the first email deployed. Subject. Contract reevaluation per retention clause. Immediate attention required. It came from Apex Engineering's legal team. Polite, firm, lethal. Per our executed clause dated April 18, 2025, We are formally initiating a comprehensive review of all current service deliverables, contracts and performance milestones. Our agreement with Vanguard Systems was contingent upon direct engagement with Trinity Lawson. In her absence, we are exercising our right to suspend all obligations pending renegotiation. That first one was like the opening note of a funeral march. At 7:31 p.m. the next one hit. Integrated Solutions. Then Horizon Analytics. Then Catalyst Industries. Then Unified Networks. By 8:15 p.m. my secure inbox was flooded. Legal representatives, procurement directors, CTOs and CIOs. People who hadn't emailed in months were now lobbing grenades across the conference tables of Vanguard Systems. Every subject line had similar language. Per Clause 4B, triggering contingency provision, immediate suspension of deliverables, notification of terms review following personnel change. Every one legally binding. Every one engineered by me months ago in the quiet. Inside 90 minutes, $260 million in contracts, nearly half the company's booked revenue, was now listed as pending, paused, or under active renegotiation. That's the thing about trust. It doesn't appear on a balance sheet until it walks out the door and takes the entire foundation with it. At 8:52 p.m. my personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. Garrett. I let it ring. Watched it vibrate across the patio table like a dying fish. Voicemail. Then another. Then a text. We need to talk. Please. I tapped the screen. Do not disturb. Because no, Garrett. We don't need to talk. You already did all the talking. In town halls and passive-aggressive email threads. During backdoor meetings with HR while pretending to empower senior leadership. You gave the speeches. You made the calls. Now you get to live with them. At 9:11 p.m., Nicole texted me a screenshot. An internal thread from Integrated's legal department, CC'd to Vanguard's general counsel. Just to clarify, our continued business with Vanguard was predicated on Trinity Lawson's leadership. Her removal constitutes a material change in the service relationship. We are not obligated to continue under present terms. By 10 p.m., Garrett had tried calling 6 more times. Samuel twice. Even Lydia sent a message. Are you okay? Everything's exploding. I didn't respond. Not because I was being cold. Because there was nothing left to say. This was never personal. It was surgical. Measured. Prepared with the same precision I used to orchestrate global client deployments. Except this time the rollout wasn't software. It was justice. I closed the laptop, looked up at the sky. Stars were showing now, scattered and shy, like they'd heard the commotion and wanted to see who won. Inside, I could hear the chime of another email arriving. Probably another client pulling the pin. The machine that was Vanguard Systems, so confident in its metrics and dashboards, had been gutted by the one thing it couldn't measure: human loyalty. They thought they could strip it away, bury it under organizational charts and empty vision statements. But loyalty doesn't vanish. It waits. And tonight it answered. Loudly, legally, without raising its voice. Wednesday morning, 6:58 a.m. The boardroom at Vanguard Systems was already humming with the panic of executives in expensive suits realizing their empire was built on quicksand and the tide had just rolled in. The emergency meeting had been called at midnight. No agenda. Just one line from the CEO. All board members and executive leadership. Mandatory attendance. Situation. Client retention crisis. The phrase client retention crisis might sound dull on paper. But when $260 million evaporates overnight, it becomes cardiac arrest territory. The CEO, Lawrence Brennan, the kind of man who'd once told me, perception drives reality, was pale and furious. Not the explosive, desk-pounding fury. No, this was the quiet internal bleeding of someone whose quarterly bonus had just vanished in a cloud of legal clauses and contract language. He stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight you could hear molars grinding. Someone explain, he said, voice low and ice-cold. How nearly half our booked revenue is now legally suspended due to one employee's departure. Silence. Then legal. Miranda, barely 4 months into her role, cleared her throat. She had a manila folder trembling in her hands, which is never a good sign in a room full of corporate veterans. These clauses were lawful, she said quietly. Each was client-signed, clean, no violation of employment terms. She didn't leverage internal IP. She used personal communication channels. Nothing traceable to company systems. Lawrence blinked. So you're telling me she legally walked out and took our clients with her? Garrett, seated 3 chairs down, tried to rally. She didn't notify leadership. This was sabotage. She operated in bad faith. That's when the CFO, Helen, who hadn't spoken yet, looked up from her laptop, adjusted her glasses and said flatly, she didn't have to. All heads turned. Lawrence narrowed his eyes. Explain. Helen didn't flinch. The clients signed retention clauses. They're legal instruments, not sabotage. Not breach. Just smart risk management from their perspective. Trinity gave them an option. Now they're using it. Garrett's face drained of color. But she wasn't authorized to negotiate. She didn't negotiate, Helen snapped. She didn't promise discounts. She didn't use proprietary documentation. She built trust. That's not illegal, Garrett. That's just rare. The room went dead silent. Miranda tried to offer something, anything. We could attempt to argue undue influence or breach of fiduciary duty, but there's no evidence. In fact, several clients documented in writing that they approached her first. Lawrence's mouth became a thin line. He turned slowly to Garrett. And your plan for operational scalability was to fire the one person actually holding the accounts together? Garrett opened his mouth. Closed it. Nothing came out. Helen added with surgical precision. Also worth noting, half the accounts impacted were on the priority renewal list Garrett submitted 3 weeks ago. The ones he bragged about personally securing. Lawrence's head turned deliberately. Fully. To the board. Garrett stammered. I didn't know she had these clauses. She blindsided us. She didn't blindside us, Helen said. She protected herself. And our clients followed because she's the only one they trusted. That's not sabotage. That's gravity. Silence again until one of the outside board members, an older woman with more gray hair than remaining patients, muttered, "Why weren't we informed?" Samuel spoke up, voice trembling slightly. There were concerns about her boundaries with clients. We tried to realign her toward non-client-facing responsibilities. We followed proper protocol. Lawrence turned toward him slowly, deliberately. Your protocol just detonated our Q3. You buried our most valuable asset under performance reviews and alignment discussions while she was holding the entire company together with duct tape and relationship equity. Samuel's face fell. His tablet dimmed in his lap. Effective immediately, Lawrence said. HR oversight is suspended. Your role is under review. Samuel didn't respond. Just gathered his things in silence and left. As for Garrett, when Lawrence turned toward him next, there was no speech, no dramatic termination, just a single sentence. Clear out your office. You're done. And that was it. By noon, Garrett's email was deactivated. His name disappeared from the leadership page. Internal Slack channels buzzed with speculation and rumors, but nobody said it out loud because everyone already knew. By 2 p.m., legal was on conference calls with outside counsel trying to understand how many contracts could be salvaged, renegotiated, or recovered. By 3 p.m., the stock price dropped 6 points in after-hours trading after word leaked that multiple enterprise customers were reviewing vendor relationships. And by 4 p.m., nobody had heard from Trinity Lawson. Nobody knew what she was doing next. But everyone, every single person, knew she was winning. The morning was still. Not metaphorically. I mean genuinely still, like the universe had decided to hold its breath just for me. I sat on my back patio in sweatpants older than most junior employees. Bare feet on cool concrete, steam curling off my coffee mug like a victory dance nobody choreographed. Birds chirped obliviously. A neighbor's sprinkler hissed to life. Somewhere down the block, a garbage truck groaned and rumbled. Me. I hadn't slept that well in a decade. The doorbell rang at 8:22 a.m. sharp, professional. Not a friend, not a neighbor. That was a courier knock. I opened the door to find a suited man holding a white envelope and a digital tablet. Trinity Lawson? I nodded. Delivery from Vanguard Systems. Requires signature. I didn't ask what was inside. Didn't need to. I scrawled my name, took the envelope, let the door click shut. Back on the patio, I opened it with one hand while sipping coffee with the other. Inside, a cashier's check for the full severance amount. A standard NDA I would absolutely not be signing. and a letter that began with, "We appreciate your contributions," and ended with, "We wish you success in your future endeavors." I laughed out loud. The letter fluttered in my hand, weak and oblivious. They still thought they were sending me off with a pat on the head and a check to quiet the storm. But the storm already had a name and it wasn't going anywhere. My phone buzzed. Secure line. "Oh. You sitting down?" she said, voice too casual to be innocent. "Hit me." She forwarded an email. Subject: Joint Statement, Vendor Realignment effective immediately. From 6 of the top accounts in Vanguard's portfolio. PEX Engineering, Integrated Solutions, Horizon Analytics, Catalyst Industries, Unified Networks, and Cortec Dynamics. The body was short, unapologetic. "In light of recent structural changes at Vanguard Systems, we have jointly decided to discontinue services under our current contracts effective immediately. We will be transitioning our needs to an independent consultancy led by Trinity Lawson. Our trust was with her. It remains with her." Below that, 6 digital signatures. 6 accounts. $260 million gone. "With me." Another text from Nicole followed immediately. "You're now officially CEO of an LLC. I filed it this morning. Business accounts are live. Welcome to your boutique firm." I blinked. Smiled. No launch party, no startup pitch deck, no glossy landing page. Just 6 heavyweight clients already on board. Trust weaponized. Loyalty monetized. Freedom notarized. I leaned back in my chair, sun warming my face, and watched the neighborhood go about its sleepy morning routine. While Vanguard's headquarters was undoubtedly on fire across 12 different Slack channels. They thought I'd be a footnote. They didn't realize I was the fine print. Because people forget. Contracts expire. Software ages. PowerPoint decks fade. But trust? Trust is renewable. And mine just got a 10-year extension with full equity. I picked up my phone one last time and opened the group thread Nicole created. 6 client executives, 1 lawyer and me. I dropped in a screenshot of my new email signature. Simple, clean. Trinity Lawson Principal Consultant Lawson Strategic Partnerships LLC. Underneath I typed, "Trust is a currency." And mine just appreciated. Then I closed my laptop, finished my coffee and let the world spin without me chasing it anymore. 3 months later, I was sitting in a corner office I'd leased in a converted warehouse downtown. Exposed brick floor-to-ceiling windows, plants I actually remembered to water. The kind of space that screamed, "I built this myself," instead of "corporate gave me a cube." My team consisted of 4 people. 4. Not 40. Not 400. Just 4 brilliant, loyal, competent humans who actually gave a damn about the work. No HR department policing my calendar. No middle managers justifying their existence with unnecessary meetings. No executives taking credit for my strategy while simultaneously undermining my authority. Just clean work. Good relationships. Fair compensation. The clients who'd followed me weren't just staying. They were thriving. Without Vanguard's bureaucratic nightmare slowing everything down, we were delivering faster, better, smarter. Projects that used to take 9 months were wrapping in 5. Issues that used to require 17 approval layers were resolved with a single phone call. Turns out when you remove the BS, work actually gets done. Malcolm from Apex called me one afternoon, laughing. "Trinity, I don't know how to say this without sounding weird, but this is the best our infrastructure has ever run. Ever. In 15 years. That's what happens when the people doing the work actually talk to each other," I said. "Vanguard called us last week," he added. "Tried to win us back. Offered a 30% discount and some VP personally managing our account." "What did you say?" I said, "We're not interested in discounts. We're interested in people who show up. And you've been showing up for years." I smiled. "Appreciate that, Malcolm." "No," he said. "Thank you. For not giving up on us when it would have been easier." After we hung up, I sat there for a moment. Just breathing. Grateful. Grounded. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been loud, messy, destructive. This was consequence. Natural, inevitable consequence for a company that mistook loyalty for dependency and relationships for liability. They wanted scalability. They got it. Just not the kind they expected. My phone buzzed. Text from Nicole. Vanguard's Q3 earnings just dropped. Revenue down 42%. Stock down 18%. Garrett's LinkedIn says he's exploring new opportunities. Translation: unemployed. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. There was no satisfaction in someone else's failure. Only relief that I was no longer tied to it. That evening I locked up the office, walked to my car and drove home with the windows down. The air was crisp, autumn settling in with that particular kind of clarity that makes everything feel possible. When I got home, my partner was in the kitchen making dinner. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the space. "How was your day?" they asked. "Good," I said. "Really good." And I meant it. Because for the first time in 9 years, my work didn't feel like survival. It felt like choice. I wasn't fighting to prove my worth. I wasn't drowning in politics. I wasn't sacrificing my peace for someone else's profit margin. I was just building, creating, leading, on my own terms. That night I poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch and opened my journal. I'd been keeping one since the day I walked out of Vanguard. Documenting not just the events but the feelings, the growth, the lessons. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Loyalty isn't weakness. It's currency. But it has to go both ways. The moment it becomes one-sided, you're not being loyal, you're being used." I spent years being used. Painted as essential while being treated as disposable. Praised in public, undermined in private. Walking away wasn't failure. It was the smartest business decision I ever made. Because the relationships I built weren't theirs to keep. They were mine to carry. I closed the journal, set it aside and looked out the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Vanguard was probably still scrambling. Still trying to plug the holes. Still wondering how one person could dismantle half their revenue stream without breaking a single law. The answer was simple. I didn't dismantle anything. I just stopped holding it together. And gravity did the rest. 6 months after my exit, I got an email. Not from a client, not from Nicole. From Lydia. Subject line: "Thought you'd want to know." I almost didn't open it. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. "Trinity, I don't know if you're even reading these anymore, but I thought you'd want to hear. Vanguard just announced a merger." Well, they're calling it a merger. Everyone knows it's an acquisition. We're being absorbed by a larger firm. Most of the leadership team is gone. Lawrence retired. Helen took a position elsewhere. Half the staff was let go last month. The company you built your career at doesn't really exist anymore. I don't know if that makes you feel vindicated or sad or nothing at all. But I wanted you to know. For what it's worth, you were right. About all of it. Take care, Lydia. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and stared out the window. Did I feel vindicated? Not really. Did I feel sad? A little. Not for the company but for the people who'd given years of their lives to a place that never valued them properly. Mostly I felt free. Free from the weight of carrying something that was never mine to carry. Free from the illusion that loyalty to an institution mattered more than loyalty to myself. I'd spent 9 years pouring everything into Vanguard. My time, my energy, my relationships, my reputation. I'd sacrificed weekends and holidays and personal boundaries because I believed it mattered. And it did matter. Just not to them. But it mattered to the clients who followed me. It mattered to the team I built. It mattered to the life I was creating on my own terms. That was enough. More than enough. I stood up, stretched and walked over to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. One of those perfect moments that feels too cinematic to be real. My phone buzzed. Text from Malcolm. "Quarterly review next week? Let's grab dinner after." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. Because that's what it was about now. Not contracts or metrics or revenue targets. Just people. Trust. Showing up. The things that actually mattered. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back down and opened my journal one more time. Final entry on Vanguard. They didn't fire me because I was bad at my job. They fired me because I was too good at it. And that scared them. They wanted control more than they wanted results. They wanted compliance more than they wanted loyalty. So they chose hierarchy over humanity. And it cost them everything. Lesson learned. Never make yourself smaller to fit someone else's vision. Build your own. I closed the journal, set it on the shelf and decided that would be the last time I wrote about them. Because I wasn't defined by what I survived. I was defined by what I built next. And what I was building. It was just getting started.